The river flows a little faster, and the birds chirp a bit louder as spring begins to appear in this Norwegian suburb. A short train ride from Oslo. The crisp air and sun make for a pleasant commute for Father Leif Knutsen as he makes his way through the woods to visit his son. The sounds of the train and the gravel, the birds, and the remaining traces of winter beneath his feet are just a few of the simple signs of the world around him. A world his son feels, hears, and experiences very differently. Here, the sound and feeling of the water is more controlled, providing some peace and comfort for Leif's son, Jacob.
The bubble bath in particular is something that obviously helps him relax a little bit. I think it provides him with some sensory relief.
A feeling of relief that is particularly necessary for Jacob.
It's interesting, people ask me questions, they have certain assumptions about what he's going to be like. And I often tell them that if they met him for the first time, it would take a few minutes to realize how significant his impairments are.
Even in his reflection, it doesn't take long to spot Jacob's charm and good humor.
He's very good at of building personal relationships with individuals.
But those relationships he builds rely very little on conversation.
I think the hardest part is that he is unable to communicate exactly what he wants or what he doesn't want.
For most of his life, Jacob has been unable to talk.
So I think he lives a life of constant frustration in not being able to express his preferences as clearly as he would like people to understand them.
Before turning 2, he was diagnosed with autism.
It was catastrophic for the whole family. I mean, it sort of upended our expectations about our future.
It's a condition that's had a profound impact on Jacob, beyond just his communication.
He's really totally dependent on adults to have any kind of life at all.
Now in his mid-20s, Jacob lives in a group home with 7 other adults and several dozen staff.
Hi, Jacob. Hi.
With the serious disabilities like we have, we need a lot of staff.
With over 30 years in the field,
Han helt fantastisk. Han så kul kar.
Siri Blum is in charge of managing the staff at Jacob's group home.
It's kind of my passion. I think it's really gives me so much meaning to help people get a good life.
Over the past few years, she's gotten to know Jacob quite well. Describing him as warm, gentle, and perceptive.
He picks up on our moods and our personalities and if he feels safe or not.
Siri's also gotten a close look at some of Jacob's main challenges.
He's very sensitive to sound, but also to light and to stress and everything.
So the world around him can sometimes be a bit overwhelming.
Of course. You know, with autism, this is the case.
Okay, ha det. Så kan du si ha det til Erik?
While autism has touched Jacob's life most closely, it's also left a mark on his family.
Being a parent to a kid with special needs, especially when they're severe special needs, but probably in all cases, really confronts you with your limitations. You realize very quickly that you can do everything you possibly can. You can put in all the effort you want. You can put in your best judgment, your best resources, and it's still not going to be everything that your child needs.
While Jacob no longer lives with his family,
And this is sort of the big investment for him, this lounge chair, which he actually doesn't use that lot.
Leif still plays an active role in his life.
You're kind of in a lot of ways, a voice for Jacob, right? You have to be.
I try, yeah, I have to be, so I try to be. And I have no illusions that I'm a perfect voice for him. You know, I just have to do the best that I can.
Being a father and advocate has come with a series of life-altering decisions since Jacob was diagnosed.
I've had to make it my first priority in every decision I've made since that point.
The biggest change came in 2009 when Jacob turned 10 and his support needs grew greater.
Because he was getting bigger and he was getting more challenging.
Leif decided to move with Jacob from their previous home in the US to Norway, where Leif was born and spent most of his childhood.
So it was a very, very difficult decision to do that, especially because it broke up the family and especially because it separated Jacob and Talia. That was really, that was the hard part, really.
Talia is Jacob's younger sister, born just 9 minutes after him.
Because Jacob and Talia are twins, they'd never known an existence without each other.
When Leif and Jacob moved across the Atlantic, Talia and Jacob's mom remained in the US, where they still live.
It seemed like sort of an unnatural break for them both.
While he describes the move as the least bad of only bad options, Leif says it was the decision he thought would be best for Jacob's future.
It was uncertain at the time. I couldn't know for sure, but in hindsight, he's settled in really well here.
Before coming to Norway, Jacob had about 8 years of school in their home state of New Jersey.
In the US, we had access to very good specialists, occupational therapists, speech therapists. We had really good people working with him.
But trying to organize all of Jacob's services and health needs was a major effort.
Both Jacob's mother and I, just spent a lot of time and energy trying to make that all work.
As he got older, there was growing uncertainty about what his future in the U.S. would look like after high school.
I was terrified. All kinds of horrible scenarios went through my mind. And I guess, you always worry about the worst case scenario, but they just seemed not completely unlikely there.
For Leif, those scenarios seemed less likely in Norway, with a stronger welfare state and support system.
I think it's more ingrained into the political culture that we take care of people who can't take care of themselves.
After speaking with several schools and parents, Leif decided the laws around services these kids are entitled to were stronger in Norway.
And that in the long run, it would also include these residential services that would be an entitlement that they would have to deal with. Whereas in the US, I found out that it wasn't all terrible, but it was much more sort of hit and miss what you would be able to achieve in practical terms.
Plus, he says Jacob's security in Norway would be less dependent on his family's financial resources.
So I figured this was a safer place for him to be.
14 years since the big move, Leif and Jacob have built a new life here.
When I was on my own with him after we came to Norway, I was terrified that something was going to happen to me. So a big part of my agenda was to make him less dependent on me.
Particularly over the past few years since moving into his group home, Jacob has become less dependent on his father alone.
Sometimes it seems he's just happy to see me and he kicks me out after a few minutes, and I think all he needs to know is that I'm around.
But other times, he still holds him close, at least for a little while.
I sometimes get the sense that he appreciates his independence from his parents,
Always on his toes, literally, Jacob is an active young man.
He likes to be out in the forest, and enjoy sort of nature.
Daily walks are an important part of his routine, along with community outings to the local sensory house, an aquatic center, and a nearby lunch spot.
I think today Jacob have a really good life, but very often he needs parents that are dedicated and people working around Jacob that are dedicated.
Leif agrees that his son is pretty content nowadays. But he says the big challenge moving forward will be making sure Jacob's horizons don't get narrower over time.
I'm fine with things on a week-to-week basis, but over the course of the next few years, I'm more concerned that he has a varied and challenging life and that he finds meaning from that.
Something Siri, too, identifies as a priority.
Is it an ongoing desire to kind of challenge and stimulate Jacob more, within reason, of course?
Of course, it is. It will never stop. If you don't train his skills, it fades, and it fades fast.
Leif says there's an ongoing tension between challenging Jacob, but not pushing him over the edge.
If he's overstimulated, he shuts down, and in some cases may even have a temper tantrum. But if he's understimulated, he gets restless and also has a temper tantrum.
Which means exposing him to new experiences needs to be done in a professional way.
The things that sort of expand his world have to be very programmatic. And that means that you also need professional help in designing them and supervising and coaching how to do these things.
To practice new skills, many of the other group home residents spend their days at activity centers run by the municipality.
But because of Jacob's mood swings, he can't do that.
His needs are individual, and they're different and maybe peculiar for sort of the administrators in the municipality.
That's given Jacob's staff extra responsibility to figure out how to expand his routine, which contributed to the creation of this work and leisure space on the same property as the home.
We are at the new activity house. It's not yet in use, but it's going to be. We just need the internet.
Siri says the upper floor will be for all residents.
So we have just filled up with, pots and pans and plates and everything.
A place to cook, play games, and make art.
Oh yeah.
But the downstairs has been designed specifically with Jacob in mind,
Så går den runt på den.
and will have a major focus on practicing communication in nonverbal ways.
Jacob's skills are, they need to be repeated all the time. Otherwise he forgets them, like sign language. So we thought about this area as a training kind of station for communication.
It's a skill both Leif and Siri say is critical for improving Jacob's life.
And he needs people that are willing to keep teaching him how to communicate and never give up.
And people, Leif says, who will hold him to a high standard.
He thrives on higher expectations, and he's happy to live up to or down to lower expectations.
Getting an activity space for Jacob is something Siri and Leif have spent years fighting for.
I think it's challenging that the system is so big, so what seems like a simple thing, a simple step, have so many side steps.
One of many efforts to get the government systems to better understand Jacob's needs.
If you don't have persons behind you to fight for you, I think it's easy also to get forgotten. So I think that Jacob is really lucky to have both us, but also his father.
While Leif saw a brighter future for Jacob in Norway, he acknowledges some challenges seem to transcend a country's borders.
I suppose if I were going to push for sort of changes in public policy, one of the things would be that to give them more seamless lives.
As of now, Jacob gets his services from several different agencies.
For them to sort of create one experience for him means that they have to coordinate among themselves, and they don't.
Which puts some added stress on Leif as Jacob's primary advocate.
This was something that I was unprepared for, was that there's little support for parents who have kids with autism.
Yet another experience that transcends cultures.
You end up having to figure out a lot of stuff on your own. So you do end up feeling kind of isolated and confused.
But beyond the significant challenges, fighting to improve Jacob's life has taught those around him some important life lessons.
I think it's made me a better human being, too. Made me more aware of diversity in humankind, of what it means to have empathy for people.
But it's also Jacob himself who's made a profound impact.
Because of Jacob, 5 people have made their career choices and decided to go into helping people like him. And I don't know if I could say that. Certainly not by his age.
What have you learned most from Jacob? How has he impacted you the most?
I think courage, I can't fathom how brave he is to face the world and show so much trust in the world when it's so uncertain, when so much of it must be scary. It's actually pretty inspiring.
As the years go by, Leif continues to consider Jacob's future.
So I think everybody has the same needs for living dignified and meaningful life.
A future that in many ways will be shaped by the people around him.
I'm hoping that he'll somehow, both with the family that he has, of whom many are in the US, but also the people around him now, over time, has a network of people who are close to him.
For over a decade, no person has been closer to Jacob's life than his dad.
He just keeps on going. He never gives up.
A role he'll continue to play, even as their relationship evolves over time.
So if that's something that if he ever gets to the point where he looks back in his life, and I hope he can look at me and say that, and accept that I did my best, but it wasn't always perfect.
A wish from father to son as they both fight for dignity in a world of uncertainty. In Oslo, Norway, I'm Eric Benekon.